Hello, I'm George Gonzalez, and I'm obsessed with making games. And today we're going to talk about NPC and interacting with NPCs. We are going to cover a lot of stuff. It's going to be short, but it's going to be packed with a lot of things. I could make small videos on each subject because I think each one in itself is very important to be able to search. And so it's going to be hard in the end. But for now, just know that if you stick around, you'll learn something. So the first thing is, what are we going to do? So the main task I'm going to show you right now, we are going to create an NPC that when you get close to it, it'll interact. And this is the same thing that we've been doing in the previous videos. It's a third-person character controller from Unity, the template. So it's a template asset. So I will also cover some stuff that I've learned while dealing with the headaches of the template. And basically, we're going to approach, this is our NPC. You see a white box. And when you get close, there'll be this interact button. And then you click on the button, and it says, hello, I'm Robert. How are you? And then we can click up here. I could do a better way of highlighting it, but for now. And then if you walk away, and that's what we're working on today. So let's say we start by creating an empty game object, right? Let's say like this and name it. I usually, it's going to be a prefab, I name it P underscore and whatever it is. And as you can tell, it's already in there. We have our NPC. So let me move over to this view. We have our lovely cube. The first tip that I have here for you guys is the parent. When you put a parent transform, it makes it really easy to, let me move this. When you have parent transform, it makes it easier to offset either the transform or the rotation. So let me show you what I mean. So see how this cube, I just made it, I just modeled it, and it's centered in here. So if I move it or I rotate it, see how it does that? If I wanted to change the rotation or the transform, I just do the offset and then I rotate the parent. This is handy when you're like trying to have the player look at something, or you have a billboard. Many times when you have a camera and you want to say, okay, I want to, let's say I wanted to do an offset on position and then not rotation, I could do something like this. This is good for cameras, usually. Rotation parent. And so what will happen is usually the rotation is first, depending on how you want to do this, but you can do a lot of cool stuff with it. So for example, the transform will move, we can call it parent position instead, position. And then the rotation has an offset. And so now you can move it like this, right? So there's an offset to the position. So you could do stuff like that where, and then you interact. If you have a script that does certain things, you can do that with each parent. Okay, so that gives you more flexibility, and then you don't have to deal with the model, right? Because at times, like, well, I'm gonna have to re-export it and recenter it. Sometimes for animations, you do want the feet usually, but that just depends on what you're doing. But most of the time, that is ideal. So we have this cube, and then we have this detection sphere, and we kept the detection sphere with the cube so that when we move everything, the detection goes with it. So the first thing we're gonna go over is this trigger enter. Ideally, what the main thing is, this detection sphere, it has to be in the same layer as the player. So what we did is we went add player, add layer, and then here we typed in player. Okay, so you could do that anytime you want. When you're in an object, you just click up here on the left and add layer for what you need. And then if you wanted to modify, layers are very interesting because by default everything interacts with each other. But I like to do it a different way. So if you go into settings, hold on, edit project settings, physics. So you see I'm already here. Layer collision matrix. This gives you an idea of what touches what. And ideally, usually I have it like this. I like that because then water doesn't interact with anything but water. Player is the same. So if you wanted a layer to interact with a player that's in water, you just click that one and turn it on. I like it this way because instead of everything working, nothing works until you set it to. So for example, if I set it like this all the way across with these off, and what happens is the player falls through. So I'll show you. So you can see that I'm not lying. And how it behaves, because you might have this happen to you. Okay, so see, wonky. So the next thing we want to do, see, and you would, and the moment that happens, you'll be like, oh my gosh, everything's breaking. Oh no, I just reverted back. But it's important to understand what is going on so you can fix it. All we have to do is click, because this is a default layer and the player. Because what happened is this thing was on default most of the time, but I changed it to player for a reason, because I want this robot to be detected. This has a capsule somewhere in here. See, this is the capsule right there. And this capsule is the character controller, and he has his trigger, and we change it to the player. We have the tag player just in case, but this is only going to interact with player layer and default, because we changed that right when we went to the settings. Let me show you again just in case. Physics, settings, and we have default and player. So that fixes the falling through. The character controller works on both layers. Next, okay, so we have the layers. The layers is important. The second tip with detecting triggers or collisions. Okay, so there's two things there, but the main thing to watch out for is rigid body. Rigid body is what creates the detection. So anytime you're going to detect something, whether it's on trigger enter or on collision enter, you need a rigid body. Whatever is doing the detection needs a rigid body. Okay, that you have to make sure. Not the other one doesn't need it. This one, I think the other one does have it too, but it doesn't matter. This is not going to do the computation. Okay. The other thing to be aware of is the difference between is kinematic. And usually if I check this, this thing will have gravity and it'll fall through. The main thing is you have kinematic, which is movement. So if you move something with translate.move, because you'll get a lot of times when you type in ChatGPT, how do I move this? How do I animate this? And ChatGPT will usually do kinematic events, or it might do add force. So if you're working with physics, you want gravity, okay? Physics, gravity. So you have to turn this off. And what you're going to do to detect those is on collision enter. Okay, and then it detects a collision, and then it'll give you a specific point where it collides. So if you wanted to like shoot an arrow and detect where the arrow is supposed to be so that it gets stuck on the player, that's on collision enter. Usually, yeah. And then on trigger enter is for kinematic objects. And just be aware that in order to move these rigid bodies, you have to use translate.move. You can actually move the transform. If a rigid body is gravity, so if I have gravity enabled and is doing collision, then you can't use translate.move. If it does move, it's gonna break. It's not gonna work really like you think it will. The best way to do that, to move those objects, is with force. You add force in a specific direction. And typically, I would advise to use kinematic for most of the stuff, because physics is expensive and performant, but oftentimes is necessary. So it depends on your needs. Usually, you can get away by doing different things like ray cast and sphere cast, and still be fine. So my advice is to try to avoid physics unless that's what you're wanting to do, like ragdoll stuff. And but you can turn it on and off, and you can do it at different points. So you don't have to always be running the physics. So that's the main thing, because oftentimes I see these tips that I just told you will save you hours, because I've seen so many. If you look in the forums, or when you run into this problem, you'll have problems where like, oh, why is this thing not being detected, or why is this thing not colliding, or like any detection issue comes from usually from that problem. It's not understanding how physics and kinematic objects work, because they don't mix very well. And so be aware of that. The same with layers and raycast. It's a whole, yeah, it's really takes time to get used to it, but that's why I'm showing you how it's working right now. And that's why I made this video, is because I wanted to make sure that you're aware of these things and you can see how it works in a template. Okay, so we have the physics. Okay, and the first script that we're going to talk about that kind of goes along with what I just showed you, because it's kinematic, we're going to do on trigger enter. Okay, on trigger enter, we're going to check if the other tag is player. Now, we could have done something else like get component. There's other more performant ways to do this, but for the sake of the video, this gets the job done. We're not worried about huge performance things right now. We are focused on making sure it works. Okay, so compare the tag to player, and then we invoke the Unity event. So you need Unity engine dot event. So you need to use this. Let me zoom in order to use the events. And then you have the Unity events here, on player detected, on player left. And we just say, hey, launch this event. And the reason why I did this is because I really like to just, detecting the player is something you'll do a lot in games. When it's out of bounds, when it gets hit, when it dies, when it resets, yada, yada. There's a lot of reasons for detecting the player. So a player detection script is valuable, because you'll just do this. And sometimes you'll need more, but for the most part, this gets the job done. So see right here, we have the on player detected. And so whenever the player detects this, whenever this detects the player, it'll do something. And so we can always change the scale as much as we want. We can make it bigger, smaller, without changing anything about the player. And what it does can be different than other. So this is nice, because I can put this player detection skill on something else and have a different boundary, and it just works. Okay, so once you do it, so you don't have to debug it multiple times. So then what we're going to do is we're going to activate the canvas for the button press. So what we're going to do is we're trying to, when the player is close enough to the NPC, they're going to interact with the NPC. Now, I want to make sure you're aware, and I'm going to get out my Miro board. The first focus is the NPC with player detection. We just went over the dialogue manager, the UI for pop-up, and then button to interact. Now, the whole point, another lesson, something that you can think about, is designing for the player experience. This game is a third person with a third person template. And you have to take into account what you have, what you don't have. Right now, one of the issues is that, as you can see, when I hit play, it will use the mouse to move around, right? So, oh, and it's not moving the mouse. It's not moving with the mouse. So see how this is not moving with the mouse? That I did that so that we could click. Oftentimes you'll have where you have to make decisions in here. um, and and you have to think about the player experience. What is it going to be like? Because you have the cursor locked, input for look. So then I click this, and this is in the starter asset input. So this is part of the template. If by default these two are locked, so what I would do first is unlock. If you're going to use the UI, you need the cursor unlocked, and then cursor input for look. And now it's going to look where the mouse is. So you have to think about the experience. See, right now it's locked, but the cursor, I can still use it. So let's go look into it. So if we go here, interact, see, still works. So that's the nice thing about that. Now, let's say you wanted to do something like this. We have a button. Let me see. If we have a button, right, that's detected. Let me see. We go in close to here. We can also enable that to test. Okay, so we could have multiple type of experiences here. Let me make sure. Okay, so we're gonna hit play again. And you have to think about if it's first person, if it's mobile, if it's VR, and depending on what you are planning on like delivering this on, you have to think about what are the limitations, what is the player gonna be doing. So see, so we have a button that we could click up here if we needed to, or we could do a button here. See how like I can click here and it would do the same thing, and then here it would interact. So both work, right? The way that you interact can be in 3D space or in a UI. Those are things, but for the sake of simplicity and so that we don't go crazy, I decided to say, okay, I had to find that this was locking the raycast, unlock that, and then make, if I wanted to have the input still move with the cursor, then we can do that. So that's that check mark. We also have different things for jump and sprint, but for now, that is the main thing, is think about the experience. And then these would, then as you go through these, you would know how to best apply those to your game. Because you can use most of the stuff that we're using now, collision, untrigger enter, button clicks and stuff, you can do it on your own. You can do it regardless of the platform. It's just how you how do you trigger one for the other, because these are all events. Most of the stuff is event driven code, and so it's important that you try to think about the player experience. So let's keep going. I showed you where it turns on this dialog, this canvas, right? It's the UI. So let me tell you about the canvas for a little bit. We have the dialog manager. Okay, we're going to dive into this. The reason why I added this dialog manager is that it's an instance, and so that way we can access it from anywhere in the game, because eventually you have a bunch of NPCs and you click interact or talk to them or kill them or whatever. You're going to interact with the NPCs, and that so you don't want to have to like drag and drop. You might move to another scene, and so what this is going to do is this is going to be there for you to use whenever it's needed. And so in this case scenario, we had like a click event that also use this function. So this is nice because we have an instance and we can use it in multiple scenarios. And I can show you one of those scenarios is here. We had this clickable event, and that was the other line, that 3D object to click. So it's just like a fake button in 3D space, and we would use the dialog manager instance dot start dialog. So that's how we would do it. But again, like I said, for the sake of simplicity, we just, what we did in here, let me show you. NPC, we have the detection, right? And this detection enables this canvas. And then we just have a button. And the button, like I said, has a highlighter. So if I wanted to choose what the highlight color is, I would just do this and it would change. And then on click, when I click it, it will send a string to that dialog manager. So this is very hard-coded, meaning that I have to drag and drop. So I have to drag and drop this. But you won't always do a drag and drop. Because you don't know who's going to speak or who you're going to interact, right? So this button has to be filled up with whatever information you need, instead of, because if I wanted a new interaction with, like, let's say Bill instead of Bob or Robert or whatever, we go in here and then we have to change the string here, blah, 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 right? And that's going to be a pain because you'll have 20 buttons and then you have to pair them up. That's not scalable and it's not very good. That's the whole point we're here as developers, to make these things easier to scale. So the next, what we would do. What would we do to do that? Well, we're going to do that in the next video. In the next video, we're going to go over specifically how to go through these one by one. The other thing is this button just turns on this other canvas. And this canvas has the close button. Again, see, it just turns things off. Select the game object, go in here, game object, set active, false. And with this one, it's the same. You drag and drop this in here, and then in here, dialog message, and then you look for that start NPC. And you have to make sure, in order for the function to be there, it has to have this. And if I added another string in here, it would not show up. So just so FYI, it only takes one argument per time. So if you wanted to pass along more messages or more parameters, you'd have to find another way to do that with other events. And I have other videos on the Marble Snap videos where I show you how to do those kind of events. But this one is trying to keep it simple. Okay, so we have, this is all we have. We had the player detection, the dialog manager, and that's everything. The rest are scripts that I was messing around with, but all this is button events. And the main thing is the collision. And thinking about, okay, how do we use a third person in this scenario, a trigger enter. So the next time we're going to use scriptable objects to hold data for the NPC, what they are, and then fill that out so that we can then use it. And I'll show you a cool way to do that. Then there's other things that we could do in the event. But the other thing we'll do is also pause the game. Because what happens is you might use this for a pause menu. When you hit escape, you hit P for pause or whatever, and you'll need a pop-up. You don't want the game to continue while you're in pause. So watch this, what happens. I hit interact and it blocks my view, but if you listen, well, I guess you can't hear because it's not. Let me show you. If I'm here, see, the game's still running, and you can see the UI is coming on and off. That is not going to work, right? It is not a good thing because it's not going to work out. So the way we're going to learn how to pause the game, and we are going to learn how to improve the NPC so that you can scale it and actually do it the right way, not just drag and drop stuff. Hopefully you like this video. If you have questions, this was specifically made for someone in my community and game devs. If you have questions about your game or skills that you need, like comment below or come and join Endgame Devs, where I can help you one-on-one to finish your games. See ya.